Proving Your Worth by Carnivale, read by the Nightmare Rider. Boredom had never really agreed with Rainbow Dash. To her, it felt like 1,000 dull stabbing knives were conjoining together in her skull, nagging at her to pick up her lazy self to do something productive. Yet she couldn't. She never felt the need to. What had there been to do? On the other hand, the only things that were there to do were either practice her flying tricks or take a long, well-needed nap on her favourite fluffy cloud that floated nonchalantly over Ponyville. And on this specific day, she had chosen the latter. She had been laying on the cloud for a while now, but couldn't seem to be able to fall asleep. Her eyes were closed, but her brain was on high alert. It was bugging her to no end, and she couldn't figure out what was causing her mind to be of uneasiness. Eventually, she caved in and rolled over onto her back to gaze up at the myriad of white clouds passing through the atmosphere. They seemed to be so at peace that it would be easy for them to fall asleep, and Dash felt a trickle of envy glide through her stomach. Grudgingly, she ran 2 blue hooves down the lengths of her face. Her eyelids felt heavy, and they could have fallen shut at any moment. But they didn't. Her mind wasn't letting them. Sighing in exasperation, the cyan Pegasus rolled over onto her side and found herself gazing down on the hustle and bustle of Ponyville below. She saw the usual: Daisy, Roselock and Lily tending to their beautiful coloured flowers, Big Macintosh lugging a heavy crate full of ripe apples ready for selling, Scootaloo buzzing around the town centre on her scooter, Rainbow Dash chuckled at that, Lyra and Bonbon chatting idly over their usual pastries, and the manager of Quills and Sofas fixing a sign that hung lopsided on the post. Rainbow Dash sighed as the usual things went on in the town, but she furrowed her eyebrows when she found something mysteriously tugging at her heart. She felt that something was missing. No, some pony was missing. Rainbow Dash squinted her ruby eyes as she scanned the streets again, looking for the specific thing that made her brow crease with worry. Then she got it. The missing pieces of her brain lodged together, and on that moment she realised exactly why she couldn't fall asleep in the first place. Studying the town again to make sure her hunch was right, she realised that there was no crazy song that was being belted out for no reason. There was no confetti or streamers being launched everywhere. There was no giggle or guffaw that made you smile no matter how annoying it may sound. And there was no super hyper pink pony parading through town with a ginormous grin plastered to her face. There was no Pinkie Pie. Rainbow Dash gazed on, her eyebrows furrowing again. Weird, she thought to herself. He doesn't like her. She's usually out and about doing her normal crazy Pinkie Pie antics, right? Rainbow Dash suddenly felt empty, and now by looking more closely at the scene, she could plainly see the other ponies felt the same way. She noticed that Lyra and Bonbon's conversation seemed to be more hush. There was less of spring in every pony's step, some even looked angered, and there was more of a sullen atmosphere overall. Dash bit the inside of her cheek thoughtfully. She decided that if she was going to find out exactly why no pink party ponies parading around town, she was going to do it right away. Rainbow Dash flared her wings and dove to the grounds below, in which she landed gracefully and folded her wings back against her sides. She decided to look for Pinkie with her hooves on the ground, just in case she missed her while flying. The pony could be anywhere, and she wouldn't even know it. Some ponies seemed to accidentally shoulder her, but didn't apologise. Rainbow Dash figured that the source of every pony's bad attitude was because Pinkie Pie wasn't there to cheer them up. She scowled and pressed on. Looking around town from the ground, she realised that mostly every pony had a down look on their face. How much had she missed? She chewed her lip thoughtfully. She had given her leisure to the sky most of the day, but that was it. Suddenly, she was shoved hard by a large stallion and almost collapsed on the ground. On the spur of the moment, she opened her wings and beat them strongly, preventing her from falling onto the cobblestone path. She whipped her head around, glaring daggers at the pony who had pushed her. "Hey, what was that for?" she demanded, flaring her wings intimidatingly. He just stared at her, his eyes sullen and cold. He merely answered gruffly, "Did see you there, maggot." Rainbow Dash shook a fisted hoof at the lumbering stallion who was beginning to turn away. "Even if you're grumpy, doesn't mean you have to make every pony else grumpy," she snarled. He didn't answer to that, and he was being swept away by the sea of disgruntled ponies. Rainbow Dash growled under her breath, lashing her tail and whipped around, haphazardly stumbling into Mr. Cake, who was busy pushing the twins around in the stroller. "Oh, sorry there, Miss Dash," he said apologetically. He smiled benevolently at her, his orange freckles spreading more distinctly across his face. The twins babbled in their stroller. "Where are you off to this afternoon?" "I'm looking for Pinkie Pie. Have you seen her?" Mr. Cake's smile faded slowly. His expression turned grave and solemn, but he nodded all the same. Yeah, I've seen her. She's back at the shop." Rainbow Dash nodded, her eyes creasing at Mr. Cake's sudden change in mood. "Thanks." Then he smiled at her again, yet it was a timid and fleeting. "I'm sure she would love to see you. She needs a friend right about now." And with that, they parted ways. Rainbow Dash's heart began to thud with worry. She gnawed at her bottom lip. Was Pinkie Pie hurt? What happened to her? Was she ill? Broken? Sad? The question paraded around in her head like a deafening mantra, but she couldn't afford to waste time. Her friend needed her. She flapped her wings, leaped into the air, and hightailed it towards Sugar Cube Corner. The bell above the door jangled boisterously when Rainbow Dash sauntered into the shop. Immediately, the warm, heavy aroma of freshly baked goods and pastries hit her right in the nostrils, and she nearly closed her eyes in pleasure as she took it all in. It felt homely, as it always did when she walked in, and she stood for a couple of seconds to bask in its appeal. The delicate pastel colours of the shop graced the walls. Rainbow Dash walked up to the front counter, only to be confronted by the plump, friendly face of Mrs. Cake. She smiled warmly at the cyan mare, and a compassionate expression automatically made Dash smile back. "Oh, hello there, Miss Rainbow Dash. What can I do for you today?" she asked, looking about ready to take her order. "Well, actually, I'm looking for Pinkie Pie. Is she here?" Just then, Mrs. Cake took on an expression her husband had flashed before, but it seemed more nurturing than sad. Her rosette eyes seemed moist and dejected. "Oh, the poor dear's been locked in her room ever since the wee hours of last night," she explained solemnly. "Carrot Cake and I tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't let us in. It's not like her at all, and we're extremely worried." Then her face gave off the littlest amount of hope. "I'm glad one of her friends is here, though. Maybe you could figure out what's making our little ginger snap feel so blue." She had a hopeful look in her eye that Dash couldn't possibly turn down, and she didn't intend to either. She smiled determinedly, her eyes twinkling. "Of course, Mrs. Cake. I'll do what I can." And with that, she turned around and began to tread up the stairs towards Pinkie's room. "Oh, thank you so much, dearie," she heard Mrs. Cake call as she disappeared around the bend. Rainbow Dash flicked her tail and approached the door to Pinkie's room. Luckily, she had been there more than once and didn't intend on walking in on any pony who could possibly be on the other rooms. She exhaled slowly and raised her hoot to knock on the door. There was nothing but a lengthy pause. Rainbow Dash bit the inside of her cheek. A dejected voice suddenly filled the gap, and it sounded so monotonously sombre that it caused Dash's heart to drop into her stomach. "Pinkie Pie is not here at the moment," the voice droned. "Please leave a message after the beep. Beep." Rainbow Dash cringed. "Pinkie Pie, it's me. It's Rainbow Dash." Another silence hung in the ranks of the air. It was so long that it made Dash feel anxious and awkward at the same time. She scuffed a hoof against the floor and gazed pleadingly at the door. "Pinkie Pie, please open up. I want to... No, I need to talk to you. Please come out." Rainbow Dash didn't want to convert to begging, but she desired heavily to talk to Pinkie and find out what has made her pink friend so blue. There was another pause, yet it was shorter than the first bouts of silence. The sound of scuttling hooves played from behind the door, and Dash felt the knots of her stomach loosen. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. The Cyan Pegasus hesitantly traipsed into the room, and scouted the area looked incredibly disheveled. There were fragments of pop balloons scattered everywhere. The party cannon had been abruptly shoved against the wall with several marks across it. The rug and the curtains were heavily rumpled along with the bedspread and pillows, and the entire atmosphere of the room just looked solemn and grey overall. Rainbow Dash winced. She then focused her eyes on the middle of the room, and there held the most devastating thing that Rainbow Dash probably didn't want to ever see again, even though it had been twice already. There, curled up like a skinny ball on the rug, sat Pinkie Pie. She was staring straight at Dash, and her eyes were dim and distraught. Dried tear streaks lined her fur, which seemed to have grey tinge to the pink. Her usually puffy hair was pinned straight, hanging like a steel curtain and obscuring half her face. Her mouth was a thin line, her whole body still and desolate. Dash couldn't help but cringe at the defeated image that was her friend. "Pinkie?" she croaked out. Pinkie didn't move, merely blinked as the sudden tears threatened to spill over her cheeks. "Hi, Dashie," she managed to utter fleetingly. Gummy began to gnaw on Dash's hoof. Grimacing, she gently shoved him away and made to sit by Pinky on the carpet. Pinky moved to make room, and Dash could tell that it hurt her to do even such a small gesture. She rested her hindquarters next to her friend, swishing her tail on the ground as silence gripped them once again. "Mr. and Mrs. Cake have been trying to get me to clean up this room for years, but I always forget," Pinky finally begun, making small banter. "They're going to have a fit once they figure out what state it's in now." A small chuckle radiated from her mouth, yet it was raspy and bleak. Rainbow Dash grit her teeth. "Pinky, every pony out is freaking disgruntled without you. I came in here to figure out why you locked yourself in the room. It isn't like you." She looked at her dim blue eyes. "Tell me what's wrong." Pinky suddenly scowled, causing Dash to slightly reel back in surprise. "Pinky, I'm your friend. I need you to tell me why you're so sad, because I care about you." Pinky's scowl vanished and her eyes grew softer. She swiveled her head around slowly to look at Rainbow Dash dead in the eye, and just then her entire facade collapsed. Tears began to stream from her cerulean eyes, and she crumpled in Rainbow Dash's arms. She buried her face in Dash's blue chest, wrapping her forelegs tightly around her middle, and violent sobs wrecking through her body. Rainbow Dash's stomach flipped, and she held onto her pink friend tightly. She felt awkward, but she knew her friend needed some solace. Hesitantly, she rested her chin on Pinkie Pie's head and gently rocked her back and forth until the sobs died down into mere whimpers. She rubbed her back soothingly. Pinkie swallowed some more tears and spoke words as insufficient as they were. I'm sad because today is the day my parents died." Rainbow Dash gasped. She didn't mean to do it so loudly, it just slipped out. Pinkie Pie sat up and sniffled. Rainbow Dash wrapped a comforting wing around her shoulder. The pink pony leaned into her embrace. Dash was still trying to register it all, nearly oblivious to her actions. "Your parents? They died today?" "Well, not exactly," Pinkie said. "They died 3 years ago. Today is the day I like to pay my respects." "Did they die together?" Rainbow Dash asked gently. "Yeah, something like that. They left me at home and then just didn't come back. Before my birthday, too." Her ears drooped against the side of her head, and she convulsed into shivers. Rainbow Dash gripped her friend tighter. "Your parents dying the day before your birthday? Jeez, that must be harsh. And the burning and remembering them? Paying respects? Oh, Celestia." She couldn't imagine it. "Haven't you told Mr. and Mrs. Cake? They're like foster parents, aren't they?" Pinkie chewed her lip. "No, I feel like I can't talk to them. And I just don't want them to feel bad for me. They're like my parents, sure, but..." She trailed off. "Pinkie, over the year we've been your friends, you haven't even told us?" Pinkie sighed, pulling Gummy into her lap and stroking him lovingly. "I didn't feel the need to. I didn't want you girls to worry about me on this day, especially the day before I celebrated being alive." She sniffled again, more tears threatening to fall. "Oh, Dashie," Pinkie lamented, burying her nose in her friend's chest. "I just miss them so much." "I know. I just wish there was a way." Before Dash could even finish her sentence, a bright idea popped into her head. She began to beam, and Pinkie pulled away, confused. "Dashie?" Rainbow turned her face to her friend, her ruby eyes sparkling with giddiness. "Pinkie Pie, what you need is some cheering up, and who else could do that but me?" She pressed her hoof against her chest, grinning like a goof. Pinkie cocked her head. "You are going to cheer me up?" "Exactly, my pink friend," she exclaimed. She squished her muzzle against Pinkie's and grabbed her pink hooves with the blue ones, the smile never leaving her lips. "It's time to dry your tears. Let's go home and let go all of your problems." "Rainbow Dash, I don't think..." "Come on, I have the perfect place to start." Rainbow Dash swept her friend up on all fours, clutching her tight, and dragged her out of the door towards her ideas of fun. Rainbow Dash led the way to the kitchen first. Luckily, the shop was just closing for the rest of the day, and the cakes weren't baking in there, so it was just going to be the two of them. Rainbow Dash grinned excitedly, tugging her pink friend as she stood next to the counter. Dashie, what are we doing here?" she questioned, watching as the Rainbow Dash pulled out a bunch of baking supplies and a cookbook with piqued interest. She was blank on how the Cyan Mare knew where to locate all that stuff.
Well, I know how much you love to bake, so we're going to be making, she paused for dramatic effect, cupcakes!
Pinky brushed her curtain of hair away from her face, growing frustrated when it slid back over her shoulder in a brisk movement. She chewed her lip.
Listen, Dash, I'm not feeling up to it. Sure you are,
Rainbow Dash said. Her bout of sheer happiness she was displaying like a theatre performance was really working for her.
But no buts. So, would we make chocolate cupcakes or vanilla?
She asked, leafing through the recipe books in order to find a page with a picture of cupcakes on it.
Rainbow Dash.
Chocolate or vanilla? Pinky sighed.
Vanilla.
Rainbow Dash smiled broadly.
Now let's go. I'm sure this will cheer you up.
Pinky tried to copy her smile, but failed uselessly. Her mind still felt sullen and shut down. Rainbow Dash realised this with urgent pang of her chest, and immediately, with the image of her friend happy again spurring her on, she pulled her friend into a cupcake-making clutches.
Rainbow Dash, I'm not sure that's how you use an egg beater,
Pinky said. During the past hour, they had been struggling to make the perfect batch of cupcakes, but Rainbow Dash had never been that keen on baking, and Pinky was still feeling quite bereaved to do so much. And yet she had been quite useful in helping pick up all the cupcakes off the floor when Rainbow Dash accidentally spilled them all. Other than that, she hadn't been enthusiastic about doing anything at all. All that the both of them were really worrying about was the mess they had to clean up after they were finished. The tiled walls were coated with massive amounts of flour and bits of batter, while water trickled down like rivulets across the floor. Rainbow Dash had slipped enough on it to turn her flanks red, mind you. The dirty supplies littered the counter. Right at that present moment, Rainbow Dash was using her whirring egg beater to savagely crush a couple of eggs.
How else am I going to use it?
Rainbow Dash said, clearly frustrated with how everything's been going so far. She slammed the beater down.
I thought it was called an egg beater for a reason.
Pinkie Pie shook her head in faint amusement, the disjointedly retrieved fresh eggs from the refrigerator. She set them down on the table, taking one in her hoof. Timidly, she tapped the eggs against the rim of the bowl until cracks webbed themselves on its hard exterior. The inside slid into the bowl, and Pinkie repeated the action with the rest.
Oh!
Rainbow Dash blushed in an embarrassing shade of red, but she managed to forget her stupidity as she gazed at her friend with a copious grin.
See? Now we're getting somewhere. Don't you feel better now we're baked, try baking cupcakes?
She fluttered her eyelids hopefully. Pinkie merely shrugged, her whole physique still looking limp and lifeless as ever. Her lips were still looking in a thin, straight position, and Rainbow Dash felt her own droop into a slow frown. She shook her head, clearing it away, and raised a hoof to her chin, scratching it thoughtfully. She must think of something else to do. What else was there to do in Ponyville?
Dashy?
Pinkie voiced skeptically. Just then, Dash's brain lit up with a fantastic idea. Her eyes grew wide, and she glanced at Pinkie with a devilish expression. The pink pony glanced around uncomfortably, tucking her hair behind her ear again.
The next thing we are going to do is sure to make your pants fly off with laughter,
Rainbow Dash exclaimed. She gripped Pinkie Pie's face between her hooves and shook her even so slightly. Grinning so broadly her face might as well have been split in two.
Rainbow Dash?
The pink pony said uneasily.
You're starting to scare me just a teensy-weensy little bit. No excuses,
Dash exclaimed. Then, on that moment, she remembered to finish her sentence from before.
We are going to pull a prank. On who?
Pinkie asked curiously. Rainbow Dash pondered for a few minutes before her mind finally came to a conclusion. She grinned corruptly again and rubbed her hooves together, still deep in thought.
We are going to prank Twilight, and I know just what to do, she exclaimed giddily. Luckily, earlier today I saw her going out for lunch with Spike, but we have no time to lose. We need to stop at the joke shop before Hoof. We can't afford to waste time. Okay, but yeah!
Pinkie Pie's sentence was cut off as the rainbow-maned Pegasus whisked her out of the kitchen in a prismatic blue and pink blur. Celestia's sun beat down warmly on the joke shop as Rainbow Dash slunk out of its entrance, gripping a fresh can of prankster invisibility spray, Pinkie closely entoned behind her. Dash began to stroke the spray can like it was a first precious pet, chuckling oh so creepily, and Pinkie uncomfortably slid away from her friend without her noticing.
So, what now?
Pinkie asked, shattering the uncomfortable atmosphere. She blew some hair away from her face, a timid gesture. Rainbow Dash snapped immediately out of her reverie. Her magenta eyes were wide and frantic, as if she had just remembered to do something and they only had a couple of minutes to do it.
Right, come on!
She suddenly took off with a faint rainbow trail streaming out behind her. Pinkie Pie struggled to catch up as they both raced towards the library in a frenzied blur.
If this doesn't cheer Pinkie Pie up, I don't know what will,
Rainbow Dash thought to herself as her hooves continued to strike the ground in lithe motions. She caught sight of her pink friend out of the corner of her eye. She looked as sombre as she did when Dash first found her.
Pinkie loves pulling pranks as well as the next pony.
Soon enough, they approached the library. The sun was beating down heavily through the clouds, and Dash felt the little goblets of sweat bead upon her forehead and neck. She turned to Pinkie Pie, placed the hood to her lips, and cautiously advanced towards the nearest window. She planted her front hooves below the sill and ever so slowly advanced her eyes an inch above the scaffolding. Her gaze swept about the room, and when she was sure no pony was inside, she turned towards Pinkie and motioned for her to come closer. Rainbow Dash ordered her friend to be quiet, just in case, and gently shoved her through the window. When she was in, she hoisted herself inside and landed ungracefully on the wooden floor below. Pinkie helped her up. She stood, groaning, and shook herself off.
"What are we doing here?"
she asked. A sly grin crossed Rainbow Dash's lips.
"Watch and learn, my pink friend,"
she said before turning towards the bookshelves. She pressed the nozzle and she hissed as a can spray coated the novel, immediately causing it to disappear. Pinkie gasped in surprise and Dash grinned devilishly as she turned towards the rest of the books. In the next swiftest moments, all the books were completely invisible, and Rainbow Dash stuck back to admire her handiwork. She smiled in satisfaction, capping the spray can and tossing it to the nearest garbage bin.
"Oh boy, Twilight is sure to freak!"
Just then, the two of them heard the lock on the front door click. Rainbow Dash whipped around, her heart hammering in her chest as nervous sweat appeared on her brow. The door began to slowly creak open, and she turned to Pinkie, who was anxiously beginning to back away.
"Crap, she's home!"
Dash whispered harshly. Frantically, she located the nearest pot plant and shoved her friend behind it, closely following behind. They packed themselves tightly together and held hooves against each other's lips when the sound of clopping hooves on wooden floorboards filled the room. Rainbow Dash cautiously peeked from behind the leaves of the plant. She saw Twilight, Sparkle and Spike lazily sauntering into their home, totally unbeknownst to Dash's master plan. She had to hold a giggle of mirth.
"Thanks for picking this spot for lunch, Spike,"
Twilight said to her assistant.
"It was delicious."
Spike nodded in her favour.
"No problem. I'm definitely glad that place had gemstones. Why wouldn't I have picked it?"
he said, patting his round belly. Twilight giggled.
"I'm just going to finish up some work in here, so you can—"
Alicorn suddenly gasped. It was a loud, astounded gasp that made Dash wiggle with anticipation in her seat.
"Here comes the snap,"
she thought mithrily. She fought hard to suppress a giggle, absent-mindedly driving her hooves harder against Pinkie's mouth. The pink pony made a muffled sound. Twilight threw back her head in rage.
"Where in the name of sweet Celestia did all my books go?"
she screeched gratingly. Spike clambered down the stairs boisterously. He shuffled into the room, looking quite bewildered.
"Twilight? What's wrong? Huh?"
he gasped too.
"This isn't going to end well,"
Pinkie whispered obliviously to her friend. Dash nodded and nearly snorted, tears of laughter rolling down her face in salty rivulets. Twilight leered over Spike, eyes burning with fury, and Dash couldn't tell if he was trying hard to make himself smaller.
"Did you do this?" she shrieked. "If this is your idea of funny, then how come I'm not laughing?"
Pinkie stared in disbelief, but at the same time, ever so faintly, a small smirk began to upturn on her lips. Rainbow Dash felt pride flutter in her stomach, but she didn't want to say anything in case laughter slipped out and blew her cover.
"Twilight, I didn't—"
Spike stammered, his green eyes widening shock and fright. Sorely then, Rainbow Dash couldn't take it any more. She pried Pinkie's hoof from her mouth and burst into a glamorous, irrepressible laughter, voice cracking like fireworks. Tears continued to stream down her blue cheeks, and Twilight and Spike's heads snapped in her direction.
"Who goes there?"
Twilight demanded, flaring her wings. Rainbow Dash half fell, half leapt out from the potted plant, dragging Pinkie out with her. Her ribs were on fire, but it was worth every second of pain. Twilight flashed them confused, angry looks.
Rainbow? Pinky? What the hell?
She stomped her hoof on the ground, the sound of thundering about the room.
Did you two do this? Yes,
Rainbow Dash cried, throwing up her hooves.
Yes we did. Didn't we, Pinks?
Pinky nodded, the beautiful smirk that Rainbow Dash was so proud of still showing on her lips. Twilight seemed to be at a loss for word. Her mouth formed disconnecting shapes.
How? What? Just get out!
She finally screamed, brutally throwing open the door with her magic. Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie didn't have a chance to apologise, it's not like they wanted to anyway, before a glowing magenta aura surrounded them and tossed them out like rag dolls out into the street. The door slammed shut behind them and an enraged snarl followed. Rainbow Dash had trouble picking herself up from the street on account of she was still laughing uncontrollably, so Pinkie had to do it for her.
That was awesome!
Dash exclaimed, throwing her hooves into the air.
Did you see the look on her face? Priceless!
After another giddy guffaw, she glanced at her friend. Hope sprang into her eyes.
It was enough to cheer you up, right?
It was pretty funny, Pinkie admitted. Her smile had grown a bit larger, and Rainbow Dash felt anticipation swelling in her stomach. But something wasn't right. Pinkie wasn't back to her old self. Her hair was still hanging limp across her face, and her coat still had that sombre grey tinge. Her blue eyes weren't as dim, but still solemn. Rainbow Dash's heart fluttered in her chest.
No problem. We just gotta figure out something else to do, yes?
She racked her brain for something, anything to do to make her friend feel more like her old self again. But what if nothing worked? A deep, sharp pang shot through her chest at the thought of her friend never being able to be herself again, never being able to Pinkie Pie again. And if that somehow happened, it would feel as if a destructive grey cloud had passed over Ponyville, sealing the fate and opening up a gaping hole in every pony's hearts. Rainbow Dash shuddered at the thought. They all needed Pinkie Pie, and just as sure as she was from the beginning, no, maybe even surer, Rainbow Dash was determined as ever to bring her back.
Come on, Dash! Think!
She knocked her hoof against her skull a few times.
What does Pinkie love doing?
Just then it hit her, as forcefully as a brick wall would hit her in the skull.
A party!
How come she didn't think of that before?
Yes,
she said to herself, maybe too loudly.
I'm so stupid! Jeez, Rainbow Dash!
Pinkie Pie looked at her, quite concerned.
Are you okay?
The colour drained from Rainbow Dash's face, and she grinned bashfully.
Yes. Oh, okay. Because you seemed a bit weird the whole time we've been together. No offence, right?
It took most of her patience and assistance to ignore her friend's remark. She just smiled at her friend submissively, though her teeth were clenched behind her lips.
Don't worry, Pinks. I know exactly how to cheer you up.
She heard Pinkie Pie sigh. Her ears picked up, and she looked at her friend, baffled.
Pinkie, what's the matter?
Her friend flashed a teensy smile, as teensy as they come, though her eyes were solemn and were beginning to moisten.
Oh, Rainbow Dash, I just don't think it's working. I don't think I can be cheered up. Not today. You see, this happens every single time, on this day of every year after my parents passed. I isolate myself until I feel well enough to walk out into the world, and this isn't helping anything. I just need time to think, Rainbow Dash. I just need to think.
She smiled sadly. Rainbow Dash felt her ears droop against the side of the head.
What? No, Pinkie! Don't say anything like that.
Pinkie sighed again.
I'm glad you girls didn't have to see me like this last year. It's just so hard.
Tears began to well, like clear gleaming crystals in her eyes.
I decided to make myself feel better by throwing 2 parties at once. And it worked for the time being. Before I thought you girls had abandoned me, then it all came crashing down. It felt exactly like how it did when my parents left me.
She snippled and wiped away the drops of her tears that cascaded haphazardly down her cheeks. Dash reached out towards her friend. Her heart ached, like 1,000 stabbing knives were imprinting themselves there. Pinkie Pie closed her eyes, as if to stop the flow of tears, but it managed to squirm out from behind her eyelids.
I'm sorry, Dashy. I just need to go home and think, to let it all out. This isn't... But you were so close to being cheered up,
Rainbow Dash said, She felt like mewling and wailing like a tiny kitten, but she wasn't about to let her harrowed heart shoot that far out of her chest.
Come on, I know just the way to... I just need time to think.
Pinky suddenly screamed. Her voice was full of such sorrow and devastation that drilled a new, gaping hole in Dash's heart and caused her to flinch. Tears were flowing in fast streams down her pink face, like her river racing through a bank. Rainbow Dash had never heard her friend scream like that, and she was sure she never wanted to again. It felt as if a bull had seated itself on her stomach and took all of her strength not to collapse. But, like bodies in gravity, that strength shattered. Hot tears began to prod her eyes, and no resistance held them back. Her friend was merely 3 steps away, but she didn't care. The dams behind her eyes broke, and salty tears rolled down her cheek. Her prismatic tail wrapped around her haunches, and she finally fractured. She let no sound escape her, just silent tears that ran down her face and created pools on the hard ground. She gritted her teeth, her ruby eyes drowning in her sorrow.
I knew it,
she whispered. Pinky was shaking. Her eyebrows were still furrowed like they were when she screamed, but they began to unfurl, slowly but surely. The flow of tears began to slow down, but she was at a loss for words as she looked upon her pessimist friend, sobbing in front of her, looking as dejected and crushed as she felt. Her heart seemed to pound everywhere, in her ears, her skull, her throat. She couldn't swallow. Her mouth was too dry. She willed the words to spell out.
Knew what?
Dash chuckled, but it wasn't a hearty chuckle. It was a low, dry chuckle. Pinky winced.
I knew I couldn't do it. Cheer you up, I mean. But after seeing you, I was so determined.
She hollowly blew out air.
I'm not the cheering up type, you know. I expect little ponies to do that for me. I just expect everything in the universe to go through its course and everything will get better while I lazily lie on a celestial forsaken cloud and do absolutely nothing.
She finished bitterly.
That's all I ever do.
Pinky shook her head, straight hair whipping across her face.
No, Rainbow Dash, that is not true.
She walked over to her friend and sat down behind her, wrapping a foreleg around her cyan neck and wiping away her tears.
You are a wonderful pony. You're an amazing flyer, a remarkable athlete, and your loyalty as a friend is super duper reliable.
Rainbow Dash sniffled, smiling at her friend through her tears. Pinky grinned back.
You're the best pony in the universe, Rainbow Dash, and I'm proud to call you my friend. I guess I am pretty awesome,
Rainbow Dash said, smirking.
See?
Pinky shook her lightly, knowingly.
You know, I've always looked up to you, kind of like Skiddler looks up to you.
Rainbow Dash raised her eyebrows, surprised.
Really?
She nodded.
Yeah, I used to watch you fly, a lot. I always thought to myself, wow, she's so stupid duper amazing. It must be nice to soar through the sky like her and forget about the world. Just soar, she sighed wishfully. It must feel nice. I've always wanted to fly.
Pinky began to draw random lines on the ground with her hoof.
Too bad my wings went to some pony else.
Rainbow Dash laughed. She sniffled again before drying her tears.
You really want to know what flying is like?
She asked her softly.
Well, yeah.
Pinky looked at her.
I've been thinking about it for a while now.
And then it hit Rainbow. She knew exactly how to cheer her friend up. She smiled, forgetting her sorrow. Her heart was thrilled. She stood up on all fours, her grin shining down on Pinkie Pie like 1,000 rays of Celestia's sun.
How about I take you flying then?
Pinkie Pie's cerulean eyes widened, her final tears completely diminished. They glimmered like 1,000,000 shining stars, and it was beautiful.
What? Just like that? Yeah, why not?
Dash said, flexing her legs and flaring her wings.
Besides, it'll be fun.
Pinkie now felt tears well up in her eyes, tears of joy. She threw her front legs around Dash's neck in a jovial embrace, and the cyan mare returned the gesture graciously.
Oh, Rainbow Dash, thank you.
She squeezed her tighter.
No problem, Pinkie Pie.
She managed to breathe out, face beginning to turn bluer than it already was.
Sorry, but can't breathe. Oops, sorry, Dashy,
she bluntly said, pulling away quickly. Dash merely chuckled.
That's quite all right.
Her magenta eyes twinkled and glared as sun.
Now, the fun shall begin.
Pinkie Pie's heart thudded with a nervous excitement. She closed her eyes as Rainbow Dash wrapped her forelegs around her midriff, fastened her grace around her chest, and took off into the sky. Pinkie barely had the oxygen to shriek as she felt her hooves leave the ground, and the fresh air whip against her face and buffeted her hair in a whirling pink tornado. She dared to squint open her eyes and glance down, then wished she hadn't. The world seemed to shrink beneath her as they gained altitude. Her stomach lurched as if it was a hot air balloon. She squeezed her eyes shut again, blood roaring from her ears.
You okay down there?
Rainbow Dash called to her over the howl of the wind. Her prismatic hair flew in the wind. Wings flapped eagerly on the other side of her. Pinkie nodded. Her heart and throat soared.
Yeah, Whoa!
Her stomach turned again when she felt both of them make a sharp turn. They seemed to be avoiding clouds, or Rainbow Dash wanted a little spin to their adventure. When the winds finally began to die down to a lower degree and they were gliding easily through the air, Pinkie decided to focus on the scenery rather than the flying. She slowly opened her eyes and looked down at the world. She gasped in awe as she took it all in. The world was beautiful. Patches of green, brown, and yellow land stood out like different coloured puzzle pieces. Clumps of forest stood out on the landscape, and the buildings tied to the ground stood out in vibrant colours against the plain grassy hills. And dots that were milling about looked to be other ponies to Pinkie Pie, and she felt a giggle rise in her throat and how tiny they looked.
Since when did we get up so high?
She asked the flying captain with curiosity.
Just trying to make the best of it for you,
Dash said with a smile.
And also, I like to fly up here and just think and soar in the soft wind currents. It really helps my mind, you know. What are you, my psychologist?
Pinkie said. Rainbow Dash laughed, voice cracking at her friend's humour. She was mostly happy about how her friend was slowly gaining her old self back.
We're really up high, though,
Pinkie remarked uneasily.
You won't drop me, right?
She glanced at her friend, who reassuringly smiled back.
There's no way in Tartarus I'd ever let you fall.
Pinkie Pie felt her heart jump into her throat at her friend's words. She immediately felt safer, happier even. It was as if part of her was finally being pieced back together. She smiled against the cool breeze. She felt more at ease up here. Like her problems weren't even with her anymore, like they were just fragments caught up in the wind currents, flowing off away to nowhere land. She felt relaxed at the thought, closing her eyes. Then, without really meaning to, she extended her arms out to her sides, like they were wings of her own. Her lips fell open just slightly, facial muscles merely stinging. She felt good. She felt alive. Rainbow Dash looked down at her passenger. She breathed away what she saw. Her friend just looked too peaceful and soothed and calm. She swore she saw the tiniest curls flip out of her straight mane.
Pinkie, you're okay, right?
Yes, she replied calmly.
I'm terrific.
The sky began to grow darker, and Rainbow Dash decided it was time to let their flying journeys come to an end. Exhaling lazily, she angled her wings and began to set down just as they came back over Ponyville. The wind rushed in their ears and hummed their systems to settle tranquil. They glanced through the town and landed just in front of Sugar Cube Corner. Every pony was starting to clear the streets, triapsing tiredly back into their homes for a good night's sleep. Luna's moon was just beginning to come over the horizon and the celestial sun was dipping below it, causing the sky to blend in beautiful sunset colours. Pinkie Pie sighed. She was sad that the flying had to end, but she was glad she got to experience it once and for all. Her wish had become true, all because of her best friend. Rainbow Dash blinked her eyes and sat down in front of Pinkie Pie. Her wings folded neatly against her side. She looked up, only to make a shocking discovery. She gasped,
Pinkie Pie, you are...
The words came spilling out all at once, and it took a few moments for her to collect herself.
Back,
she finally whispered. And indeed she was. Her pink hair was back to the way it was, curly and lively. It stood puffed up on her head, resembling a delicious piece of cotton candy. The grey tinge was completely gone in her coat, and her blue eyes shone like a never-ending ocean that sparkled as the sun attacked its surface. Rainbow Dash failed to hold back a squeal of excitement. She gathered her friend up in a loving, tight embrace, so tight it could choke the both of them. When she pulled back, she saw the tears in the pink pony's eyes.
Pinkie, what's wrong?
Pinkie smiled. It was one of the biggest, warmest smiles she had ever seen from her. It hurt not to smile back, so she did.
I just had so much fun today, Rainbow Dash. Thank you for being there, right by my side through this hard time. Thank you for proving my worth.